Hello there, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about a variety of genre films mainly. I'm not actually going to go like highbrow for this set of videos. I should also say next week I'm taking a week off. I've got some films I want to watch that are a bit longer than I normally have a chance to watch, and it's hard to try and keep up schedule if you want to watch these longer, more ambitious films. So I'll be there a week or 2 weeks off, depending on how I do. But that's the plan, at least for now. But there will be a director's death match on the Nazar and Ronan channel. And I think it's middle of the month, so keep your eye out for that. That's going to come. That should be fun. We've got a few guests there. That should be a fun thing. We've already arranged it, so as long as nothing goes wrong, we should be in good shape. So, so I'm going to start off talking about the Shaw Brothers, two Shaw Brothers films, one of which is in the Shawscope Volume 2, another one is available generally. So these films are the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires and the Boxer's Omen. Now, I'll start with the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, which are directed by Roy Ward Baker generally, but Shang-Chi, who was one of the big, you know, Shaw Brothers directors, also added 20 minutes worth of footage at the end when the Shaw Brothers weren't happy with the lack of fighting in the film, so they added more for the Chinese market. You don't get that in the American and British and European market. You just get the film that Ward Baker shot. Although even those scenes, he had experts from Shaw Brothers doing the kung fu scenes. So this was a combination of Hammer at the end of their rope when it came to like film production. They had been huge in the 50s and early 60s. Mid 60s, they'd had some problems. They're still producing some decent stuff. By the time they hit the 70s, like this is like 10, 15 years in, they were from doing their like big gothic films that were very successful. They expanded to do some like TV tie-ins, and they expanded to do different films within a limited budget and some dramas and some psychological thrillers. But by the 70s, their mainstay of the gothic had kind of fallen away a little bit. The Exorcist was about to come out. Night Living Dead had come out. Rosemary's Baby had come out. There's a lot of modern films that come out into a new look at horror that was very different from what Hammer was doing. So Hammer had their own little niche, but the niche was no longer working. So they had to try and find a way to, you know, expand. And firstly, for Hammer, they felt that the best way was to expand what they did best rather than try to fully expand, try to partially expand. So you had like two modern Draculas, like Dracula 1972 AD and the Satanic Rites of Dracula, which I like a lot. That the second one's a lot of fun. Which was set Dracula modern day, which was a bit awkward. The films are more fun to watch now than they were at the time, I think. You had the sex vampire films like Countess Dracula and stuff like that. And you had this, which is a kind of weirdo film where because the Shaw Brothers was a Hong Kong based operation that did a lot of really great martial arts movies, and Hammer did their thing of the gothic horror, they decided to combine their talents to see if they could do a kind of gothic horror kung fu movie, which would actually pay off in the 80s. I mean, in the 80s, what they were trying to do seemed to come together in what the Hong Kong directors were trying to do with, you know, the Chinese ghost stories and the Zoo Warriors and things, where it was like kung fu and gothic and fantasy and things. So the film did set a precedent to actually go on and do some good stuff, but it would take a while. There had been some like Japanese films that try to be gothic horror, which you can find the Bloodthirsty trilogy released by Arrow Video, which I thought were a lot of fun, but they hadn't actually had much impact. So they tried this, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, the one and only. So they brought over Peter Cushing, and they brought over some other actors to combine with some actors from the Shaw Brothers School who could speak English, and then they basically did this film. that was a mix of Dracula and Kung Fu. And it's an odd one. It's a really odd one. It doesn't mean it's bad. We can't actually describe it as good, but it is fun. It's fun, and I've always enjoyed this one, even though it's got lots of problems. I mean, it's just like it goes from one type of movie to the other with abandon, and it's like it's not consistent for fans of either because you're doing one thing, then you're doing another thing, and you go back and forward, and it never really develops in a way that's enjoyable for either. So it needs to either be longer or shorter. It needs to be something, but it needs more incident because it feels like it starts, and then there's a lot few incidents, and it gets to its conclusion without much real, detail that a good story has. It just feels it has to hit the beats both sides have agreed on. If you do this in a film, do that in a film. We serve our audience in this way, we serve our audience in that way. So it's kind of what happened. A lot of co-productions in the 80s in Europe, which we used to call the Europudding, where each side had their own set of criteria what they needed if they were going to put money into the film, and it created a film that did not cater to anybody's strengths. That's what this film has. Because you have Roy Ward Baker, who was a good director. He did a lot of good stuff. He did A Night to Remember. He did The Quatermass in the Pit. He's done a lot of good films, but he was taking the work where he could get it by this point. He was not like the big auteur type of director. He was a studio director, and at this point, it was like the British film industry collapsed. The only work there was Hammer or TV. So he was doing some Hammer stuff. Then he moved on to TV again. And he did what he could with material. He more or less said this was a terrible film. Like, he was not impressed with it. They could not get Christopher Lee back to play Dracula. He would not do it. He did not get the film. Peter Cushing did it, but Christopher Lee didn't. So they had a stand-in. And one of the bizarre things early on is that the stand-in, they shoot him from one set of lighting, which makes him look garish and camp as hell. And then they go to another lighting set, which makes his makeup look normal and appropriate. So it's like, why did they shoot him the first way? What happened? So it makes their Dracula look ridiculous. And Dracula's possessing someone for most of the film. So you have Dracula in it for 10 minutes at most. And it's not even Christopher Lee. So you've got that problem. But the fun bit is Peter Cushing in base a Shaw Brothers film, because when it gets to Hong Kong and China, and they're traveling through China, it's a Shaw Brothers film where they're on a quest to go find this village that has been overrun by vampires. So you get a bit of a Shaw Brothers kind of travelogue story. So you get to see Peter Cushing in a Shaw Brothers film, which is fun, especially when he's talking about the different beliefs of vampires and so how it switches from Christianity to our Lord Buddha, which is an absurd thing, but Peter Cushing says with a straight face, which is very fun to watch. And so the film does have a joy for people who love Shaw Brothers films and love Hammer films. There is a joy of the absurdity of the crash between these two types of films that Vance would find his foot in another directors who came 10 years later, but was not going to find his foot in here because you had a director in Roy Ward Baker who didn't understand the Shaw Brothers films. It was pretty obvious he did not get it. It was like, why are we stopping for a massive fight scene? I know the producers say we need to do it, but you can pretty much tell he just was like, okay, you do your stuff. I'll just cover it. But if you're good at that, and I'll let the experts do it. And I'm pretty sure the directors from Shaw Brothers could have stepped in anytime there was an actual action scene, because it's a much more energetic set of shots. And sometimes you get a sense that when it's a bit cluttered, that's when the Hammer stuff are doing. And then sometimes it was more simplified and carefully worked out. That was more Shaw Brothers. But it felt like it passed back and forward a lot. And the better stuff came when they just let the Shaw Brothers do the action. And whenever Roy Ward Baker went near the action, it was it just was not his thing, really. I mean, he was a good director. this was not his thing, and it was like you're asking somebody to do something they don't inherently understand the genre conventions of. They don't understand why it's fun, so they'll try to cover, they'll try to do a good professional job, but they don't get it. He's much more comfortable trying to do the gothic stuff and having these castles and the places lit with lots of different lightings and things. He's much more comfortable there. He's comfortable with Peter Cushing. He's comfortable with even the travelogue stuff, them talking things. He's fine with that. But as soon as he gets to the actual action, you can see why the Shaw brothers were frustrated, because the action was shot with someone who didn't understand it. So we get a film that's kind of two halves, really. And I'd love to see the Shaw brothers cut, because I think it would be more fun. Really, I think it would be, because if you like the Shaw brothers stuff, it would probably just be, it'd probably sillier, but it'd probably be more enjoyable. But if there's enjoying the kind of the idea of Hammer taking their mythology out into a world that's as focused on Buddha. You wish there was more of that. You wish there was more invention, that they'd hired someone to write the script that actually had a weird bent that could have actually made it work. Like someone like Christopher Wickling, who would probably made it more interesting. But here it's just by the numbers. It just feels like it's we need this, we need that. And so the film itself doesn't feel like it's very strong. And the seven golden vampires are basically vampires who are cursed, and they go and do their thing, and they're putting these zombies up. And there's lots of different scenes of them getting slowly knocked off one by one. They can be brought back over time. And there is a nice bit where they take the victims into this tomb where they're bled into this big furnace of boiling blood, which was a nice little touch of gothic, hammerish sensibility. But there's not enough of that. So there's not enough that can drag a hammer wit you get sometimes. There's not enough of the Shaw Brothers brutality. I mean, it's interesting because lots of people die in this film. There's a whole bunch of people die. And it is pretty much a riff on Seven Samurai, ultimately, because these experts are going to the village, protect the village from the vampires. But it's by note. It's not like you're not getting people taken out methodically over time in a plot that makes each death mean something. It's just like, oh, we need to rid of all these people now because we've had this scenes, let's kill them off. And it's not as satisfying as it should be. And it's not as satisfying as Hammer would do themselves or Shaw Brothers could do themselves, because the Shaw Brothers understood that deaths have to actually have an impact. Deaths, you have to set up the deaths. And then Hammer understood that too, but in this film, it's like, it's a compromise, like, okay, let's just kill them. Just get rid of them all till we can get to conclusion. Which is a conclusion is this old man versus another old man. Just like after all the kind of kung fu experts, it's like, that's it. So it's kind of frustrating in some ways, but kind of enjoyable. So now I'm going to go on to the Boxer's Omen, which is a different kind of crazy. Boxer's Omen is really something. It's directed by Kui Shing Hung, which obviously I butchered the name, but there's not much I can do with that. I'm going to butcher the name. This is a far more satisfying film, even though it's crazier than Seven Golden Vampires. This is like what happens when you put a supernatural and the kung fu world together in a crazy way. Even if some of the plot doesn't make sense, if you let the director go absolutely insane with it, you can have enjoyable results. Now, this is the Shaw Scope Volume 2, and it's one of those films that's worth having the collection just for this film because it's so insane. It's also available on YouTube if you want to go look for it on YouTube. But the Shaw Scope one is longer and has been remastered, and it looks gorgeous. So I definitely recommend getting the Shaw Scope version. The image behind me is from this film, and try to explain the plot is going to make my brain explode like I'm in Scanners, because it's right. How do we start? During a big fight, I can kickboxing fight. The brother of the main character is wins the fight, but then the guy who is defeated cheats and paralyzes him at the end of the fight when his back's turned. The guy vows revenge and goes to, I think it's Taiwan, to get revenge on him, and says, "I'll fight you at a certain time to show you how good my technique is, how useless you are." And then the same, but then he's getting he's getting these hallucinations and these images, which draws him to this temple, which is this Buddhist temple, and it turns out that these Buddhists are actually trying to trap these demons who are causing trouble in the world. And the main guy, the kung fu exorcist, basically has been killed, and he is rotting alive. Basically, his body's not rotten; it's just stasis. And this guy now has to train, has to throw away all the worldly, areas of temptation, and become a monk so he can take on this evil. So you can see there's two plots going on, and they do not mesh at all. It's just like one starts, then another starts, then every so often you go back and forth from one to the other. And halfway through, the guy thinks he's succeeded and he's amazing, and then it turns out he hasn't. And by the time he realizes that, he's already broken all his vows and he has to start again. And it's funny in that way, but mainly it's amazing because how crazy it gets. This film's crazy. This film is bodies put into the remains of a killed giant crocodile, and magic's done on them so they can come out and become this super evil, supernatural force that can kill the hero. There's all sorts of weird, like Buddhist kung fu magic stuff between the hero and the various villains he's fighting, whether it's the original hero or the new one, because the original hero takes out somebody who is got lots of followers, and that's what creates the revenge idea. And it's just nuts. It's like that's the plot, but what you don't get from that plot is just how weird this film is, just how beyond the pale this film is. It just does things like in this section behind me, all these writings come out the surrounding and into the body of the guy. And you could actually do this film as a parody, but they take it seriously to a degree in this film and just go crazy with it. And every time they do that, it's amazing because you just love it for how crazy it is. It's just nuts. It's just absolutely insane. And it's hard to explain how insane it is. It's just one of the most insane films you'll ever see. It just feels like you're in someone's drug-fueled fantasy is the best way to describe what this film feels like watching it. It just feels like you're in something that's utterly insane, that's just absolutely crazy. Because the film jumps from one to the other. You have like basically you can have one scene where a guy's visiting his brother, and then you got the next scene where he gets turned on by his girlfriend or something, and a sex scene, and then you have to go and revenge his brother, and then there's a supernatural thing, and it's like that all takes place scene to scene. It's like it's jumping so crazy from one to the other, and then they're going to like Buddhist philosophy made up by the screenwriters to get to the next crazy bit of the film. It's absolutely crazy. It's just like they felt like whoever wrote it was just writing it while on something. It's just like, yeah, it makes enough sense. We'll have some insane special effects and we'll see what happens. Now that's one of the good things about some of the crazy like Shaw Brothers and their competitors films from the 80s, where they went from the more traditional 70s stuff. In the 80s, you had the influence of like the American slasher movies, American like Nightmare on Elm Streets, and the fantasy horror, which just gave them the allowance to go much further than Americans ever would. The Americans could only go so far with the censorship. The Hong Kong guys would go so much further and so much more tasteless. And they did not have a problem with the plots being absolutely insane or the plots being beyond the pale for bad taste. That was not the problem for them. That was just something to, that was a selling point. And you can tell, it's one of those things like, Shaw Brothers must have been in problems now if they were going to finance this, and no one was saying, what? What is going on here? The film was a hit. The film was very successful. I was directed to do more. And it was like having his defining films. And it's just like, it's absolutely crazy. It pretty much is the film that Legend of Seven Vampires probably wished it was, but it would look down upon it in a sense because it's bad taste. But it's got the spirit of crazy that that film needed. This film, Boxer's Omen, just as you can tell, it's like it's a kickboxer, and there's the word Omen in the title, even though there's no like Damien or anything. It's just a hodgepodge of two genres thrown together in ways that defy any kind of logic, and just saying, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Just when you're getting bored, we'll throw in some more crazy shit. And the end is amazing. The end is pretty much a fight in this temple in the middle of nowhere where they go to try and track down the demons that have been released for the revenge. And they end up being in this temple and they have a massive fight scene at the end, which is just crazy. And it's I try to find the teachings of this Buddha who can find a way to kill the curse and stuff like that. And it's like, it's, as you can probably tell, I'm trying to remember the plot because the plot is so far behind the visual craziness I've thrown at you that you can't even remember why things happen. It's just like, that crazy thing happened. That's really fun. That's what I remember, not the reasons for it. So Boxer's Omen is, I don't want to go any further, just go watch it. Just go see it. It is absolutely crazy. It's crazy in every possible way. So I hope you enjoyed this video on these two films. I hope it makes you want to watch both films, but especially Boxer's Omen. Boxer's Omen will drive you insane in a good way. it's indefensible, but also so pleasurable. So I'll see you all later. Right, bye for now.